Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Tom Breyer. If you were with us for the opening session, you heard my talk, so it's good to see more of you in a more focused way than in a larger room. I will say it was very odd to give the keynote talk on a kind of a bit of a somber topic, talking about pandemics and snipers and all of these things, but to see the static photos of people staring back at me smiling was a little disconcerting. But anyway, it's good to see you all at this session, which is the first breakout session for the conference. The title, Values Applied to Donors, Services, and Employees. And we have three excellent speakers, presenters to join us to look at how we communicate and work with our different stakeholders, whether they be donors, whether they be implementation through our services or through our employees or volunteers. How do we actually implement our values and see them communicated through our different stakeholder groups and different responsibilities? And so we have, I'll let the speakers all introduce themselves in a more complete fashion than I can. Of course, you can see their bios in the conference program, but we have Karen Broussard, Jared Billings, and Geraldine Gallagher with us. I've asked them to prepare just some brief, anywhere from 5 to 10 to 12 minutes of just opening thoughts and reflections on this. And then I might follow up their opening remarks with some questions, but my hope is that this can be a generally free flow conversation and rich dialogue across everybody who is here. It looks like we've got 25 people in the room, which is a good, comfortable number for conversation. So let me just start, if I can. Jared, maybe you can kick us off, and while you're speaking, I'm going to grab your PowerPoint, Karen, so it's ready to go when I call on you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jared Billings. I'm the Executive Director of City of Orlando. I've heard enough shouting back, so I assume y'all can hear me. Everything good? Perfect. So I, as I said, represent City Year, which is a national nonprofit. City of Orlando here works in just Orange County, 8 public schools here in Orange County. And so I'll share first just briefly a little bit about City Year itself. Many of you probably heard of us or heard about us. Some of you all maybe not know anything. So I'll give a quick little intro on City Year. I'll talk a little bit about our values and then a little bit about how we kind of think about our values with both our workers, our core members, and then of course our funders and folks. So give a couple quick thoughts and comments, and then, as Tom said, look forward to the dialogue and conversation. I think first off, just briefly, City Year at its core, we help students and schools succeed. So we are fueled by national service. We serve in 29 sites around the country, 8 schools here in Orange County Public Schools. And in those 8 schools here, we have 80 AmeriCorps members. And so those 80 AmeriCorps members are 18 to 25 years old. They serve for a year of service, and they provide classroom and whole school supports to students so that students are able to stay on track, stay in school, ready to graduate high school. So we work in 3rd through 9th grade. Our mission is pretty laser focused on that cohort of students as we think about students entering the 3rd grade, learning to read, reading to learn, that transition, very important time. Through the end of 9th grade, research shows that if you walk into 10th grade on track to graduate high school, you're going to graduate. And so that's where we really work and focus our efforts. It's really hard work, right? So we're in this space working in 8 Title I schools, trying to basically change historic trends and change what has been failure in our system for generations. And in doing that, it really does take a strong culture, strong values. You don't get to show up every day, and it's not the movies. And many of you all that work with these students and these populations in any aspect know the challenges that while it's incredibly rewarding, it's not always rewarding on day 1, 2, or even 20. Sometimes it's day 180 or day 300 before you start to feel the investment turn back around for you. But for us, I think it's really about, we've got almost 4 different distinct groups, right? We've got core members. These are these 80 folks that come and join us for a year. They're unofficial employees of City Year. That's through AmeriCorps, which is a federal program. But they are part of our family for a year, and many come back for a second year, which is the maximum of service. So we also have a staff of 15, and so those folks are our people with us every day, all year long, and throughout year after year. We've got incredible funders. 40% of Fortune 500 companies in this country support City Year. It's a pretty amazing track record for City Year, and obviously it helps for us to be a national nonprofit. We'll have some of those national partnerships. And then, of course, community partnerships. Folks like Dr. Sissy Carroll on our board and many others that support our work just as we invest and think about not only the 3rd through 9th grade space, but also the continuum of supporting our core members and everything else. So that's the 2-minute City Year. On the values side, when you're in a mission and you're in work, that is, as I said, trying to change the way in which schools, systems, communities have operated, and when you're doing it from a lens where we don't have our own program, right? So our core members are walking into a class and they are partnering with a teacher. And so we're training them to be a partner in that classroom all day, every day, all year long. And so when you, by definition, don't have your own walls, right? So there's no, while we have a City Year office, our folks don't come to our office. We don't have clients that come here, and we don't deliver goods to them here. Especially in the time of COVID, I'll talk a little more about, I think we'll do some conversation. That's really challenging, right? So we don't get to just make our own decisions and say, here's the City Year process, here's what our plan is. All year long, we're communicating with our soon-to-be core this past year. If schools will be in service, we will be in service. So our 80 core members are in service right now at 8 public schools. So that leads to, again, that additional need for really, really strong values that permeate not just our building, but of course we're then going out as a resource into other buildings and communities and schools. And so the values really hold strong and are kind of our guiding light of what keeps us whole. So I'll give just a few quick examples of our organizational values. Service to a cause greater than self. Students first, collaboration always. We dedicate ourselves to building a more just, equal, fair, and compassionate world. We strive to constantly walk in the moccasins of others. We embrace differences as strengths that magnify our capacity to achieve our shared goals. And then my favorite, Ubuntu, I'm a person through other people. My humanity is tied to yours. And so for us at City Year, we have 2 fundamental bottom lines. We are working in schools, trying to change educational outcomes at Jones, Evans, and Oak Ridge, and then feeder middle and elementary schools below them. And then we're also trying to develop 80 core members, right? These are 18 to 25-year-olds that are working in these schools, coming to join us for a year. They receive a stipend, but they don't come, obviously, for the paycheck. There are many other ways to get a lot more money than to come to City Year for a year. They come to be able to give back, do those amazing things with students, but also be poured into and develop themselves. And so it's the best and greatest work ever, but also incredibly challenging when you're thinking about those 2 bottom lines happening all at once. At our best, they're aligned, right? So if we're training a core member how to deliver ELA breakouts and services and supports for students in 9th grade, that aligns right down the line, right? We're helping that core member and helping the student. But certainly in the time of COVID and many others, it's not quite as simple as just a one singular line of we're helping a core member through helping a student. There are often times in which we're trying to do those 2 things at once and juggling them. And then, so I'll just share a little bit about kind of my first thoughts and look forward to Karen and others as they share, kind of where they come from in the discussion. When we're thinking of our funders and our partners and our supporters, really it's about helping and magnifying what is one of our greatest strengths when we're thinking about engagement. And that we're in these 8 schools every day, all year long, right? And so instead of it being kind of a one-off where we are jumping into a school, trying to make a connection and then leaving and coming back at a later date, we're in the leadership meetings with the assistant principals. We're in the partnership meetings where we bring the data because we have a data partnership with OCPS. And so we're actually guiding many of those conversations and helping to build capacity there. And so with that deep connection, we're also able to really help connect the values or wants or opportunities from organizations, especially private organizations in this community, to where the need may most be, right? And so instead of just someone saying, hey, I've got all these resources, where do I put them? And then we're constrained by trying to find the need and matching it up. We oftentimes are able to keep some type of running list of spaces and places for folks as they come. And this year alone, hey, we've got 300 backpacks. What school, where could this go? And we're able to say, we were just in a meeting with Walker Middle School, and they're struggling. Usually they get backpacks. This year they didn't. Boom, 300 backpacks are at Walker 2 days later. And so that deep connection for us allows us to also be a partner, and to many of you all as well. That's what, I think something that I always look for. And, what are the opportunities for us, whether it's a simple, basic one like, helping Karen with food pantries and other things, or something deeper that maybe goes further beyond just kind of our straight missions and really tries to tackle something even further. So a quick list of things we're doing. We do a big annual event, as many of you all do if you're in the nonprofit space. We really highlight our core members and students. So instead of having to kind of hire speakers or bring in folks from the outside, we have an incredible resource right in front of us, and those folks really guide our programming and really allow for the deep enrichment and connection to what we do. We do school visits. Part of my mission, both just in life but also at City here, is to help show the amazing things happening at Title I schools. Right? I think we all hear in the news and we hear about the bad things or what may be going wrong. But there are really, really tremendous good news and good stories and amazing people at our Title I schools in this community. And so part of my job is to help bring folks in and tell that good news and tell that good story, because we know that positive momentum brings more momentum. If someone says, oh, this can be supported and funded, I'm going to keep doing it, keep supporting it. I think a couple other quick points, and then I'm done, I promise. Really in this moment, and I'll kind of bring us to right now, in a pandemic, in a challenging time, oftentimes support and the most kind of ready support is for those social services, those immediate needs, and they are absolutely important for us all, right? So we must be able to connect and support folks that lose jobs and need housing and need food and need any type of shelter or resourcing, helping to pay electric bills or just the basics of life. And that oftentimes is when we look at kind of donor patterns in times of pandemic and times of challenge, that is a very quick space in which people rush and provide the dollars, and should. That's absolutely where they should be doing it. I think the concern always is, in a time of scarcity, how do we make sure as a community we are also investing in those long-term things, right? So when you're thinking about investing in a third grader, the quote-unquote social and community and impact return on that investment is 10, 15, 20, 25 years away. And so oftentimes we see both public sector dollars and private sector and philanthropy shy away from some of those long-term investments in a time of challenge. And so, one of the big things I have to work towards every day is not just help people feel the emotional connection, not just be able to kind of feel that like, oh, City Year makes me feel good, here's $100, but really helps people understand the deeper need, the complex strategic thing that we're doing here, investing in these young people so that down the road, those other needs aren't even there. If someone has an education, graduates, does these other things, they'll be stable with a home, with work, with food, and all these other resources. And so, of course, we're all working in partnership together, and we know those immediate needs must be taken care of today. But part of our work, and really the thing we're trying to invest in, and I'll share more as we go, is that deeper connection to say, not only must we do the immediate, but we must continue to invest in the future. And that's always the challenge, both in Orlando, where we don't have the deep rooted, philanthropies and folks that have been here for hundreds of years, and those family foundations that exist in the Northeast and other spots. We have newer money here, and so helping them to still see that deep long-term investment is always a challenge, and especially so in this time. So looking forward to the continued conversation, and Tom, I'll toss it back to you.
Thank you, Jared. Great overview and introduction, and suggesting the challenges and the opportunities to do the work, particularly the long-term agendas that we face as organizations, that the benefits, the impacts are not immediate return impacts. The short-term gratification is not always there with the kinds of work that we do. So that's useful to think about, and I hope we can get into that more in the discussion and dialogue that follows. Let me go, if it's okay. Karen, you're already unmuted, so I'm going to go to you, and then we'll go to Geraldine. So I've got your PowerPoint here, Karen, so I will share my screen. You just tell me when you want me to move slides. Okay.
Okay. Well, I don't think we're quite ready yet, but I'll let you know. Okay. Thanks for the help, Tom. It's good to see you too. I'm Karen Broussard, VP Agency Relations and Programs at Second Harvest. And so what that means is Second Harvest, you know, we are the food bank in the community, and we provide mostly no-cost food or food that costs 19 cents a pound to about 550 other nonprofits, faith-based pantries across the 6 counties that we serve. So folks don't come into the food bank to access food themselves. They go into their own neighborhoods and communities to get the food that they have they've gathered from Second Harvest. And so, you know, that in and of itself is a massive task, managing all of that and inventory. And we have, you know, our core competency as a food bank always has been and will remain the immediate distribution of food to people who have, you know, needs right this minute. But we also have a very, the ability and commitment to look not only at the immediate, but also the near, the middle, and the long term, just like Jared, you were talking about. I mean, we're always looking at that. It can be exceedingly frustrating, and over our 35 years, we certainly experience this probably every day, where, you know, we can give food to people every week, and nothing is going to change in their lives except for that immediate moment they're not going to be hungry. So we as an organization, we've just finished another 5-year plan, and we've been moving in this direction for a long time. And that is to, as we look towards the near, the middle, and the long term, what do we have to do in this community? Who do we have to partner with? Who do we have to build coalitions with in order to get to the root causes and adjust those root causes, both through advocacy and that sort of collaborative work that we can do with people who are experts in other areas, like affordable housing, like education, like healthcare, those kinds of things that really are the fundamental building blocks of being able to hold up an individual and a family and help them achieve, you know, stability for the long term. So just like you said, Jared, that was really so well said. You know, that's what we want in our community. That's who we want our community to be. And there have been literally hundreds of years of systemic racism and other inequities, you know, that have landed us where we are now. So Second Harvest wants to play a big role in that wherever we can offer our resources, our assistance, our partnership, any way that we can, we want to be a part of that. We want to come alongside other people who are doing that, which really starts to beg what our values are and what drives us as an organization. This PowerPoint is going to largely focus on the last 6 months of work that we've done in view of COVID, and how in the heck we have managed to get the work done and try to meet a need that has doubled and in some ways, and also exponentially increased in other ways. And we haven't missed a day. We keep going with it. And I think it's important I think it's important for this group to share what and how Second Harvest relies on not only its values, but also its culture to really drive our ability to get the work done that we do. Of course, you know, we have a set of important cast of characters, really, in our work. We have the community and our funders who we are constantly and always having to be in touch with. And so I apologize to everybody who feels flooded with messages from Second Harvest through social media. I apologize to you now. It's not my fault. And then we also have that network of agencies, those 550 or so partner agencies. We have Eric Gray is with us, who is now at Christian Service Center, a longtime partner of ours. There may be others on the call that I may not know as well. But we do have our manager of that program, Patty Dela Cruz, is on today too. So she is literally our guru for that entire network, whether we are having to do compliance for that network or whether we're doing capacity building, training, teaching, further stabilizing and sustaining those agencies so that they become healthy and stable parts of their own neighborhoods and communities. So we have that group. We have the clients who are actually receiving the food. And I want to say in my title, I am Agency Relations and Programs, and we are the team of about 22 people in our entire staff of closer to 120 people across the 6 counties who actually get food into people's hands. We need to be able to figure out who needs the food, where they are, so that we can reach them, to meet them where they are, what's the best way to get the food to them, and what kind of food do they need. So needless to say, there is a lot of background work that is going on. And as we do that work, we know that we are meeting those people in ways that can support them to expand more than their immediate need. An example of that is our work with the healthcare sector, where we are having hospitals and docs refer people who are food insecure, but also have chronic disease, but cannot access the kind of food they need to be as healthy as possible, manage their illness outside of the walls of the hospital. So we're getting referrals of those folks and being able to provide exactly the right kind of food to them, along with nutrition ed, cooking demos, those kinds of things, to help stabilize them using food as medicine. That's a root cause support that helps a family and an individual get healthier, stronger, possibly go back to work, bring income into their family, those kinds of things. So that's an example of some of the work that we're doing. But let me talk a little bit more specifically. Oh, and we have our staff as our 4th component. Thanks, Tom. I just want to give you guys some examples of what's happened in the last 6 months. So we're going to flip through these next 3 slides pretty quickly, just so you can see. Let me get that out of the way. This is our weekly distribution pre-COVID. We distributed about 150,000 meals a week, typically, on a typical week. Since COVID, since about March 20th, 300,000 meals a week. In fact, I saw some numbers from last week where on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, we distributed nearly 500,000 meals a day, those 2 days. So it's a 100% increase that we continue to sustain. We don't know when it's going to end. We know it's going to have a really long tail. Go ahead and flip to the next slide, Tom. Thanks. These were our daily calls for assistance. Patty, I may not have the numbers exactly right, but pre-COVID, we were getting maybe about 50. In the age of COVID, in the first, I don't know, couple of months, we were getting 900 calls a day from people who had recently lost their jobs, did not know where to get assistance for food. And Patty, who's on this call right now, she's at this meeting, literally just, it was all hands on deck to be answering phones and getting information to folks. An 1,800% increase for about 2.5 months. Next slide, please. Oh, this is it. Okay. So pre-COVID, on the searches for assistance, we actually have a link using some technology where people can put in their address. On our website, they go to a link. On our website, they go to a link, they put in their address, and we are able to use some GIS mapping to show them where the closest pantries are to be able to access food. Pre-COVID, we were at about 63 searches, I think, a week. since about March 20th, up to 1,200. That has settled down a little bit. That was a 1,900% increase, and that went on for a couple of months. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Tom. You know, how in the world did we do this? We were the same 120 people. How did we do it? Next slide, please. So I said before, culture and values are really key to what we do. And this is how it happened at Second Harvest. We went through a lengthy exercise several years ago to really determine what our culture statements were. And these are statements that our staff, all the way from our drivers and warehouse workers to our finance department and leadership group, and everybody in between participated in and came up with these statements. We have pride in Second Harvest in our team. We treat each other like family. We trust each other. We value transparency. We innovate today to create tomorrow. We proactively embrace the concept of growth for all, and we honor our commitments. And this was done through multiple 10 or 11 person breakouts. We called them town halls. It was really interesting, and this is what we came up with. So these are concepts that are fully owned by our staff, no matter where you work in our organization. And then our values of integrity, stewardship, respect, accountability, collaboration, growth for all, and diversity further drive what we do. And some of those really stand out. And the big picture of this is that when you combine these and you have a staff of 120 people who is exceedingly diverse, come from all walks of life, have all levels of education, expertise, skill sets, etc. But everybody buys into this. What you get, next slide, please, is you get the speed of trust, which is a Stephen Covey quote. And one of the ways, or the greatest way that we were able to accomplish meeting this need that we'd never seen before, that came on like a freight train, like we all know in our own lives, personal and professional, was that every single person at the food bank trusted the other person explicitly, implicitly, to be able to do their job as in the most excellent way they could at every minute. And when you can take the burden of doubting off of yourself and your colleagues to do the best that they can do, and of course they have a lot of resources at their disposal. They've got equipment, they've got technology, they have inventory. Although at the very beginning of this whole thing, we really got really low on inventory because the supply chain for food across the country was really compromised. But we really believed that even with all of those things, if we as individuals, as people, could not trust each other or did not implicitly and explicitly trust each other, we were not going to get the work done. If we were questioning each other's motives, but that's not what happens at Second Harvest. So we leaned on our values to get everything done. That really is how it happened. The values and the culture statements that we all really own really do inspire the personal conduct by which everybody works in our organization. It really does influence everything we do and how we do what we do. We back each other up. We shoot for excellence all the time, not perfection, because you'd kill yourself doing that, and create a lot of doubt. And you know what? We get the work done faster. We get it done more efficiently and more accurately. And that is how it gets done, honestly, whether we have inventory or we're challenged with inventory, or the government, put a waiver in place or took a waiver away, or did that over the course of 2 days, because that happened as well. Those are the kinds of things that really have allowed us to be very fluid in our decision making, be creative, be innovative, And I think at the bottom of that is a high level of respect, not only for ourselves, but for our network of agencies and the people who have to receive the food from us. Patty De La Cruz on the call, you know, she worked with our agencies every day, seeing who was still able to be out there. A lot of agencies had to shut down temporarily because they relied on volunteers who were seniors and therefore more susceptible to the virus. Patty found out which agencies weren't, who could do what. We had to switch up the way that we worked. So creativity, innovation, inspiration, but above all, respect, not only for the people we work with within the food bank, but the people that we work with in the community at whatever level. That respect, I think, goes a long way, as well as that concept of honoring your commitments. And we take it really seriously. The one value that is missing, that is not written down, but I'll tell you is a very powerful one, is the value of fun. We don't write it down. I've been told, you know, pretty much any day when we were back in the building, and many of us are not in the building yet, we're working from home, you would hear laughing all the time. Especially, I've been told, we do a leadership meeting every 2 weeks in a little conference room upstairs. And so it's the seven seniors in the community, in the organization. And we often are up there hysterically laughing, but the work gets done. I'm guessing because Tom took my PowerPoint down that it's time for me to stop talking. So I will do that and move it along and hand it back to you. So thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Karen, very much. So now, Geraldine, and I think you have power to share your screen if you need to.
I do, thank you. Good morning. Tom, your keynote was inspiring and practical, and I think it's a fair statement to say that I have been both zigging and zagging for the past 6 months. So you've challenged me to think in an entirely different way. Good morning, everyone. I am the president of Valencia College Foundation, and I'm an instructor adjunct in the MNM program, which I love. So by day, I have a wonderful job, and by night and on weekends, I have a cool job too. So I'm happy to join with you all and Tom and Jared and Karen this morning. We have a lot in common that we have to share. So to get a sense of the Zoom room today, who's with us, I'd like to know who you are. So if you're a student, I'm going to ask you to click the thumbs up button in a minute. If you're a professional working in the community, I'll ask you to choose the applause button. And if you're doing both, I'm guessing you're very, very tired. You should raise your hand for help. But seriously, I'd like you to raise your hand in the participant box, okay? So right now, everybody click your button. Okay, interesting. All right, well, that's helpful to know. Thank you very much. And I will tell you, each of you absolutely deserve applause for what you are doing in the community. We're in a pandemic. So if you have shoes on this morning, you deserve special accolades, and I'm not even gonna ask you about your pants. That's a whole other story. I'm delighted really to be with you this morning to talk about something that to my mind could not be more vital. In fact, I'd say in this political environment with racial and social justice issues we're facing, we can never underestimate the importance of focusing on our values. So if you look again in the participant box to see the raise hand icon, if you're feeling a greater need to promote your values right now, more than you ever may have in the past, please raise your hand. Yeah. It's pretty wrong. It's trouble. Disturbing. And Tom, when you started this morning, I thought, wow, this is bringing the party down. But talking about the snipers and 9/11 and all of the things that we have come to together and how it coalesced us to lean forward and to lead forward was absolutely powerful. So I would say that values have always been, they've always mattered. They've always been integral to our work as nonprofits. But now, as you pointed out by raising your hands, more than ever, I believe we must demonstrate them to our constituents and to our communities as boldly as we can. My 6235 class just finished our module on ethics. Every semester, each student identifies a nonprofit that has allegedly behaved badly and evaluates the situation. So what specific ethical codes were broken? What could the nonprofit have done to prevent the situation? What steps can they take to mitigate the crisis? And how can they mend fences? And in nearly all cases, not surprisingly, the recommendation of declaring the organization's values arises among students. I've been at Valencia for 20 years. I inherited an organization that was a little bit broken and a good bit lazily managed. It was also about the time the tech bubble burst. It was a mini recession. Investors seemed shocked to find out that money could be lost in the market, although it had just happened in October of 2007, I digress. So at the time, if the foundation were a Facebook relationship, I'd call it complicated, but you could also call it really, really messy. Donors were disillusioned, they were disappointed, some were just plain mad. And when the market was returning more than 20% in previous years, foundations, as many of you professionals know, didn't blink an eye at dispersing more than 5% a year. Now, that's a problem in a down market. So what became clear to me almost immediately was that our foundation board needed to hash out amongst ourselves and agree on our values. So we bid some staff and many of the board members who'd been there a long time a fond farewell. We circled the remaining troops. We gathered new champions in the community who shared a true north. And we sat together in several facilitated sessions for hours to talk about who we are and what we stand for. What principles do we hold true? What hills are we willing to die on? We didn't rush those conversations. Every person had a voice. We sought consensus. And I would say that getting the process right is almost important, maybe even more so as the results. The conversations, the debates, sometimes the arguments that informed our guiding principles, you will see here on the screen. And I'd like to share with you how these have served us well over many years. But first, I'll share a really odd story that involves a UCF M&M intern who was searching on the internet about 15 years ago. So Jenny Lee, lo and behold, as we're looking for some research, she discovered another college had lifted our guiding principles word for word and had them on their website. They called them their values statement. So I'll let that irony sit with you for a second, their values. So Jenny was intrigued and discovered that no fewer than 6 organizations at the time were using all or part of them. So I guess what that would suggest was, well, A, I wanted to send them a plagiarism self-test, but I was counseled not to. So we decided to be flattered that the concepts resonated, universally with some organizations. I suspect I'm preaching to the choir here, but when you are working on articulating your value statements, they should reflect your organization's unique character. And these principles, I'll tell you, do continue to resonate with my board. We evaluate them along with our mission statement periodically, and they've remained fairly consistent for us. Just minor tweaks along the way. And there are lots of ways, as you know, to articulate who you are and where you're going through your mission and your vision statements. Purpose statements are also useful. We engage the AFP Donor Bill of Rights and AFP's ethical code as well when communicating with all of our people. And I will add, we shamelessly share each one of those statements and codes that we made when we felt like we had to boldly declare and demonstrate how important integrity was to our foundation. So any of you who've met me and gotten my business cards, our guiding principles have been printed on the back of our business cards for almost 20 years. The Donor Bill of Rights is printed in watermark gray on the back side of our letterhead. An integrated donor letter of agreement. Right after the details of the gift, we spell out Valencia's guiding principles, and we share the fact that our foundation board adopted AFP's code of ethics, and we write them down. And we also include our equity and non-discrimination statement. And of course, you'll find all of those on our website. So what I'd like to believe is that people know and people understand there is never a question of what we believe to be true. So much of what this matters, or what matters and what we focus on, boils down to your why. As Simon Sinek asks, what is your why? Why does your organization exist? What drives your mission? Why does it matter? And how does your donor's why intersect with your nonprofit why? Now, it's easy to talk about these things, right? We have the conversations and meetings over coffee, over Zoom, but having written them down is important. A written statement of values helps your team, your paid and volunteer teams, to make good decisions by creating an ethical framework within which you can work. It guides your staff and your volunteers' interaction with donors. And you all know, okay, well, in anthropology, cultures and civilizations are defined by the norms and their shared values. And I'd argue the same is true for our nonprofits. These values help create the culture of philanthropy that we all seek, not just externally with our donors, but internally with our staff and our volunteers. So despite the examples of these sketchy organizations that borrowed Valencia's guiding principles, the strength of these codes lies in the fact that they're shared beliefs of your leaders and your organizations, and they represent your cultural philosophy. This culture helps to reinforce, I would argue, the ethics for all your team members, because, you know, even the appearance of impropriety is a problem. This culture helps to shape the way we steward our donors, our relationships with them, and also our investments in their mission, or excuse me, their investments in our mission, right? So this culture of philosophy helps every relationship and every interaction we have with donors, and how we look at that and how we present ourselves to them. This culture also helps to demonstrate that our work is a team effort, right? Every person in the building plays a significant part in achieving mission, from the person who makes sure that your lobby or your the place you're receiving clients is spick and span, to the person who answers the phone, to the person who welcomes and greets your clients as they walk in the door, as well as all of your other staff members who are working behind the scenes. So I would say that what that means is one of our primary goals as nonprofit leaders has to be to help our board and team members identify those shared principles that will guide our work and that will nurture a robust culture of philanthropy. It offers some additional benefits. Talented mission-centered professionals who are guided by integrity are drawn to your organizations when they reflect personal values, right? So when their values match your values, there's a connection. When it's more than just words on paper, when it's the walk you walk, when times are tough, or you're in one of those really narrow places, that's also what retains your best employees, at least in my experience. Over the years, I've occasionally chosen incorrectly when hiring, and it almost always turned out that the issue wasn't their skill set or their ambition or their enthusiasm. At the end of the day, it turned out that their values weren't in sync with ours, and that shows how significant that issue can be. Discovering this has led many organizations, including our foundation and also Valencia College, to focus on mutually discerning values during our hiring processes. So in both research development and fundraising and profession, we talk about how important it is for the donor's values to align with our organizational values. And our 5146 students are very familiar with Kay Sprinkle Grace. Kay talks about the fact that philanthropy is based on values and causes, right? Not institutions. In short, she will tell you, it is not about you. And all the fundraisers and all the fundraising students in this room know that the process of fundraising is about building authentic relationships that are based on shared values and mission alignment. And I would say that this attention to values also underpins our operation. In Valencia's case, and we just got our audit back, we've had 19 perfect audits without exception. And our board will tell you that even when we had to make hard decisions, there was no doubt we would always do the right thing. We remain true to those values. That builds confidence in your team, that builds confidence in our nonprofit. And I will admit, we are certainly not perfect. We are the first to find an error and admit it. And that defines who we are, right? We're always trying to do the right thing. I'm sure my colleagues would agree that our conflicts in the workplace often result from a conflict of values. I won't talk to you about my conflict of values in spelling as opposed to other people who I occasionally work with, but that can cause issues. I mean, we've all heard about donor relationships gone wrong. The name that's come to mind, well, I won't mention any names, but when the name comes off the building or the dreadful headlines appear in the newspaper, or when you've knowingly received money from Epstein, well after law enforcement was involved and issues had hit the public and the press, you know, that's a black eye MIT and others are going to work really hard to recover from. Dr. Feldheim asked me who I wouldn't accept money from. She asked me to share that. And I don't think there's a pat answer. I'll tell you, Connie Chung, her husband, Maury Povich, are consistent annual donors. Years ago, a board member asked me why we included them. Several said they were offended by his show and suggested we shouldn't accept their gifts. I had similar feedback when we had gifts from the Parliament House. I don't think I have to explain either of those decisions to this group. I think you get it. You got the value system down, as Tom said this morning. But I think it's important to declare your values and seek to align them. It doesn't make, the fact that you values doesn't make you or your board the judges of all things. It's not an excuse to discriminate or ignore people you may not like or you may not agree with. Every case should be evaluated carefully. Many healthcare organizations and anti-smoking charities benefited from the Reynolds Tobacco Settlement Fund. So I think that there are ditches on both sides of that road to consider. So before I wrap this up, I'd like to encourage you to do two very important things, please. Vote, make your voice heard. And if you haven't, please complete your census form. And finally, I'd suggest it's incredibly important to hold each other accountable on your teams. Your shared values become part of your vocabulary and your rationale for making decisions. Simon Sinek, as I mentioned, challenges you to find your why. Stephen, as Karen mentioned, Stephen Covey, not in Speed of Trust, but he also counsels us to keep the main thing, the main thing. So think about that for a moment. Keep the main thing, the main thing. So what I would ask you this morning is to reflect on what is your main thing.
Okay. Thank you so much, Geraldine and Karen and Jared. All of you have shared such great insight from your organizations. We only have a few minutes for some questions, so I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to invite everybody to do rapid fire. Any question you have, put it into the chat box. We'll capture those chats, and if we don't have time to answer the questions in our remaining minutes here, I'll do my best to corral the panelists to see if I can get responses to your questions and send them to everybody later. So go ahead, rapid fire your questions. But if anybody has a pressing question you'd like to get up right now for any of our panelists or a general question for everybody, go ahead and raise your hand or just unmute yourself and jump in.
I have a question, actually. Can you hear me, Tom?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Geraldine, I have a question. I have never worked for a foundation. Obviously, I've worked with foundations a lot. Mike, when you were talking about the time that you all took to gather together when you had this shift of folks who were on the board and the ones I so kindly put diplomatically said a fond farewell to.
And you adrift.
Right. I'm curious, because you are a foundation that obviously represents an academic institution, and I know that I'm presuming that was your board you were working with?
That was our foundation board, not our trustee board. Right, so the college has the board of trustees, the foundation has a board of directors.
So who sort of populates that foundation board? Does it include students? Is there student voice in there?
We do not have a student voice at this point, although there is discussion about that. We have faculty and staff, but it's primarily community leaders. It's a foundation fundraising board and governing board.
Good, I was just curious about that, yeah. I think at Second Harvest, we have realized for many, many years, we felt that our primary clients was that network of agencies. And then we realized we weren't hearing the voice of the people who are actually receiving the food and that we needed to figure out a way to do that. So we've become sort of hyper vigilant and hypersensitive to include the voice of the people who will be impacted by the decisions that we make. So anyway, I was just curious
That makes perfect sense.
what your foundation's perspective, how that might have been reflected for you guys.
Let me follow up on that if I can. And Karen, Geraldine, and Jared, maybe you can plug in on here too. If you include the voices of those who are the beneficiaries of what you are doing, is there any challenge to making those individuals feel safe in contributing in the midst of others who are of a different standing, different status, different education level, different demographic? How do you create an environment where those who are beneficiaries are not feeling like pawns in a symbolic gesture of including them, but you actually want to meaningfully engage and embed their ideas in your work?
I can say that for us, I mean, it is a challenge because, you know, people who are getting food are not feeling great in their life. Sometimes they may be undocumented. Sometimes they may have other reasons that they don't want to be public about giving their opinion. They may fear retribution in some way. They're just ashamed very often. And so again, it goes back to that value of respect. How do we find a way to encourage those voices to be heard or in a way that makes them feel safe? And we work very hard at that. And generally what it involves is engaging other members of their own community. We just step back. We sort of find that safe, trusted intermediary who can be you know, forthcoming about what we're doing and why we're doing it, but let them go into the community and speak to their own communities. But we're you know, we don't want to exploit people. We don't want to make them feel worse. So that's what we're doing. But we know how important it is to understand really what they want, what their preferences are, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, instead of standing back and being the experts on it. And there are so many tentacles to that conversation. We could talk all day, but I won't.
Thank you. I'm going to note the question in the chat box, preferring that we get an audience participant question rather than my question answered, but from Sean, he's one of our participants from South Africa. He's asking everybody, have you developed a donor or partner ethics or value assessment tool that helps you investigate if you would partner or accept gifts from them? So due diligence for values, or is it just a team decision that you make whether to partner or not? So this would go for anybody. Do you have any kind of a screening test to make sure that the donor is a good fit for your organization and would represent your values well when you identify them?
We've had a conversation about that over the last couple of years of whether or not there's an actual assessment tool. I think, as always with the tool, you're limited by the bias of the creation of the tool, and so that's a challenging piece for us as we've thought about it. You know, I think I'll share not just City here, but personally, you know, I'm a big tent guy. You know, I want to bring in folks that are already right there with us, but also those that are hungry to join us, maybe aren't quite sure yet. And I think when we think about building a coalition of change in this community, it's not just about the people that have already understood it all and are right there with us. It's about those that are hungry to do that. And sometimes it's folks that are wanting to make a first gift or wanting to, or in a place to finally give and support. And so for us, it's really about that partnership of, we're going to be really transparent. It was great to hear everybody kind of sharing how transparent they are about their values. And to us, it's if someone wants to come and partner with us when those values important, in many ways that becomes the screening.
Good, thank you. Well, with that, it's 11:30 exactly. If there are other questions, we can email any of the participants, any of the panel members, or any of the team at UCF, and so we can route the questions to the appropriate person. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Geraldine, for your great insights.